now coming to the final part of today's conference, which is panel discussion. So today's panel discussion is discussing the hottest solar product trends seen at the Smart E Intersolar Munich and SNEC Shanghai. I would like to come online, invite Alex Barrows, head of PV at CRU Exawatt, and then Claudio from AIKO, Vitor from GCL. Hello, everyone.
Great.
Hey, Shravan, thanks so much for having me on.
How are you doing?
Thanks for joining. And yeah, great. No, it's really nice. So you might have followed this two-day event. It was really nice. But we are now approaching to the close of our second day of our TaiyangNews conference. And over the past sessions, we have seen presentations on several exciting new products, mainly from leading manufacturers. I think that is where the major chunk is. But we also had companies working on different components of BOS, including mounting structures, inverters, AC/DC accessories, and today we have some representation from the energy storage systems and also characterization tools. So let's start by addressing the elephant in the room, which is industry outlook. So Alex, you or your team probably have explored the exhibition floors of Intersolar in Munich and SNEC in Shanghai, and probably spoke to several companies. So what is your current impression when the industry's overcapacity situation might ease, and when do you see companies turning profitable again into green?
Yeah, I guess the big question, I would say I'm incrementally a little bit less optimistic after the show at SNEC, partly based on conversations with some of the slightly smaller manufacturers, where I guess maybe I was a little surprised how much some of them seem to almost still have their head in the sand a little bit over the sort of the huge scale of the problem that the industry has with overcapacity. So I guess one of the challenges with looking at this, like from an analyst point of view, is that the question that everyone started with was, oh, well, how long is it going to, capacity's got a bit too far ahead, but how long will it take for demand to catch up? And actually, if you look at a lot of the stages of the value chain, demand may never catch up to the level of capacity that we have now, and certainly not in the next few years. So it's not really a question of, how long is it going to take for demand to catch up? So then we have the question of, okay, well, maybe the manufacturers, will go bankrupt. We'll see them exit the market, certainly the weaker ones. That, again, has happened slower than we expected, slower than a lot of other analysts expected, I think slower than quite a few manufacturers expected. Definitely had some interesting conversations in China around maybe the role or the influence of local government in that as well, in terms of keeping some factories alive when perhaps from a sort of pure economics point of view for the manufacturer, it wouldn't necessarily make sense for that to be kept alive without extra local government support. But certainly, manufacturers going bankrupt slower than we expect. So it doesn't look like that is going to sort of bring things back into balance in the near future. So then we have this question of, okay, well, can sort of self-discipline do it? Can manufacturer production cuts at least bring supply and demand back into balance, even if it can't bring, capacity and demand back into balance? And that, the industry's had a lot of success there in terms of, if you look at poly production figures for China, they're way lower this spring than they were last spring. And the industry, I think on the whole has managed to rein production back in to match with demand. But that's not a point where, you're able to work through the excess poly inventory that's built up and the excess module inventory that's built up. So it all depends on the manufacturers. sort of their destiny is in their hands. If you believe that the industry can control itself and that we can see more self-discipline, we can see production, not just cut back to match demand, but to actually allow that inventory to be worked through, then we could potentially see a point where we return to profitability sort of middle of next year or late of next year. If we really have to sit and wait it out until enough manufacturers exit the market and we actually see sort of a huge volume of capacity leave the market, that's going to be several years and may require some other intervention. We've seen very small interventions from government in China, but not in a way that really moves the needle. It's possible we'll either need a long time or some extra intervention like that to really line things back up, unless the industry can get a hold of itself and sort of do the work itself in terms of that self-discipline.
Okay. Okay, nice. I think, yeah, at least I got some numbers during this long conversation. I think that's great. So, just coming to the theme of this event, so how do you feel the current situation has influenced, in general, the innovation in solar sector?
So I think we still see a lot of innovation. Some of those innovations are hidden. So maybe it's tweaks to TOPCon, like we saw presentations involving polyfingers on the backside of TOPCon cells and things. So it's not all sort of immediately visible when you look at the show. But there's still plenty of innovation going on there. There's a lot of manufacturers sort of laying the groundwork for back contact in the future and things like that as well. So there's still lots of sort of positive technological innovations happening there, I think. I guess the downside is that sort of background means there's some innovations that you might not want, like thinner walls on your frames or thinner encapsulant. And we've seen sort of reports of testing failures and things like that increasing. So I think there's still lots of innovation going on. Some of it is good. Some of it is things that module buyers should be a little bit cautious of. But yeah, certainly innovation never I mean, in this industry, innovation is sort of relentless. It's just a question of how positive or negative it is.
Okay. Okay. So, compared to last year SNEC and Intersolar event, so what do you feel has changed the most? Maybe Vitor or Claudio, anyone can start.
Yeah, from our side, what we see, it's if we look for Intersolar last year, mainly us, we are pushing for the back contact, and what we see the difference this year, not only us are pushing for the back contact, we are seeing many other players understanding our vision too, that if they want to move forward, back contact is the next mainstream technology that will be on the market. And on the moment we are feeling that many of the players on the market are getting in our vision too at this point.
Vitor?
Okay, from my side, I think that the main difference we saw is this cell technology topic, where each manufacturer are going. So we had it very harmonized for a certain while. And if you went to Intersolar and SNEC, you saw like some manufacturers going a straight line, some manufacturers going for more than one line. So this was basically who is going for which technology. This was very clear. On the other hand, and I think it's obvious for everyone, also the storage systems were one of the hot topics in both events.
So, what are the top 3 trends you have identified at this event? I think it's an open question to all.
Okay, so if I may follow, I think that we saw one trend about the change on the cell technology. So we see the TOPCon 2.0 and the back contact, but we also saw more than one manufacturer already bringing ideas about tandem, even if it's in a more faraway future. But this was a trend for sure, the back contact and the TOPCon. And I also noticed one trend that is the harmonized dimensions of the modules and the cells. So maybe we will have a deeper discussion on the cells format and wafers and so on. but we see some harmonization, and this was requested by, especially for the utility market, and I think this trend was very clear during these events.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that in terms of, I think something we saw last year was a huge range of rectangular wafer formats. You'd go and see some manufacturers and they'd have sort of 5 or 6 different rectangular wafer formats depending on what you wanted. And we definitely still, there definitely wasn't sort of pure standardization this time. There's still various options out there. But there's definitely a sort of coalescing, particularly around the 182 by 210 format, and the sort of 66 cell option of that for large scale modules. So we're not standardized, but I would definitely agree that there is this sort of move back towards something a little more standardized than where we were. And then from my perspective, obviously a lot more back contact on display. Not always indicative of underlying capacity having changed that much. I mean, a lot of those back contact modules are, when you push, it turns out they're based on cells purchased from AIKO or LONGi, and they are, very small volumes available only, things like that. But certainly a lot of manufacturers sort of looking at that area, experimenting with it, getting things lined up for if they make a jump in that direction in the next few years. And then I guess on the broader point that we're talking about as well, I mean, from SNEC perspective, certainly the show was a little bit smaller this year than last year. A couple of halls that weren't open, and there's some space at the back of halls that wasn't being used. So you could see some of the industry's troubles starting to emerge in terms of, who was there and how big the booths were and things like that as well.
Yeah, for this point, as my colleagues had said, we see the back contact gaming quite strong. It's a big tendency on the market. The standardization of the cells, we see it still have some variations, but much less than before. Everybody's trying to, around this moment, to optimize on the sizes that they can fit the most power on a container, because this is quite an important point. So this standardization of the size is coming to this point, trying to fit as much power on one container, so reducing the transportation costs too. And then, of course, you see all the market getting adaptation to the current situation, because the market is changing on all the time, and see the market adapting, and of course a lot of storage coming to the integration on the PV systems.
Okay, so then let's talk a little bit about the upstream, silicon and wafer. So what are the key developments have taken place in the upstream segment over the past 6 months? I think, Alex, you already mentioned. So I think that there is some kind of discipline you have already seen in polysilicon production compared to the last year. And so would you like to add anything specific related to the upstream?
Yeah, in terms of self-discipline, there's definitely sort of lower production volumes than a year ago, especially last spring. It was sort of really excessive. I guess one of the challenges is that maybe we haven't seen enough of a change over the last 6 months or so. So the problem we had 6 months ago was that poly inventory, essentially, it was still really high, even though production volumes had been cut. And the problem we see now is still kind of the same. It's not that production volumes, are way out of kilter with demand now for poly, say, but they haven't dropped low enough for that inventory to be worked through. So that's still a lot of downward price pressure there, for sure.
Claudio, can you comment on something, your observation for the upstream?
We see that market is adapting, because in some way we are in the moment of transition, that many products that are still on stock on the market are already in some way obsolete, because we have already a big difference on the power. Okay, we still have the overcapacity on the production. This transition for new technologies, this is making, of course, a little bit pressure on the pricing side. Okay, in the start of this year, this price start to stabilize a little bit with the changes in the market in China. A little bit change now, but we see this changing is not so dip a little bit more stable. Maybe on the end of the year, the market can oscillate a little bit, but in some moment you need to get the stabilization because all the players on the market need it, because if not, it's just a self-destruction on this part.
Okay. So, Vitor, I think I have a relatively longer list, especially referring back to your presentation on day one, which was day before yesterday. So, you presented the FBR process, and its main advantages are low cost and reduced carbon footprint. So, in your view, which one of these benefits are more attractive for your customers today?
Very interesting question, because it's the two main topics. I would say the carbon right now. And why? Because if you look to from a capex perspective on a PV project, also the module percentage of impact in the capex is much lower than we were used to due to the low prices, right? So the price of the wafers is not right now influencing the final customer in a hard way. But as I mentioned during my presentation, you have more and more loss, and you have more and more on project level demanding for the traceability of the CO2 emissions. So this means that in most of the projects, if you don't have it, you cannot even access the project. So right now, offering low carbon silicon materials is the biggest advantage if you compare both of them.
Okay, so but for the FBR, the GCL roadmap is to shift entirely to FBR based silicon. So can you share more details? So what is the current efficiency delta compared to the conventional feedstock, and when do you think you can really adapt the FBR to very high efficiency, something like BC, which is probably it's the pinnacle of.
Okay. To give you an idea, I was just speaking with my team in China today to confirm, because we have our roadmap of back contact and TOPCon 2.0 already for the second half of this year to be produced. So I was just confirming where we have been working in the last 10 years is mainly on the purity. And now with the purity that we are achieving, so basically we were able to add 1 or 2 nines more. This means that to all the portfolio that we are offering right now, the TOPCon 1.0, to call it that way, is based already in FBR, and our plan is to be 100% FBR, back contact and TOPCon 2.0. So it means that the products that we are starting to produce from September on will be 100% FBR. We also see that from our clients on the silicon, but competitors on the module level, that they are increasing the percentage of FBR. And this is mainly related to the carbon, but also because we can offer the purity that is needed. So regarding the delta, we don't have it.
Okay. So you
otherwise we wouldn't be as efficient, of course.
So okay, then let's talk about wafers. So Alex, as someone tracking the market so closely, have you spotted anything new during the show? So do you foresee any significant changes in the wafer formats in the coming quarters? Because some of the consultants, they also still have a small portion of larger than 210 mm, or maybe will the industry innovate any new formats?
I would never want to say that they definitely won't innovate new formats.
Okay.
But we don't expect, our forecast is essentially that 182 by 210 is going to be pretty standard, and we'll see small amounts of sort of standard M10 and G12 and other rectangular wafers, but that 182 by 210 becoming pretty ubiquitous. And in terms of sort of new things, interesting to see Longi using some antimony doping for some of their N-type wafers, but not clear to me yet quite how widely they're using that, and if it's something that's likely to be rolled out at other wafer producers as well. I don't think that's particularly likely to have a sort of major, knock-on impact downstream. I think essentially people won't notice, but it's just interesting to see. Again, I guess that there are still innovations going on, even if some of them are sort of slightly hidden upstream or hidden in the cell process or the wafer process somewhere.
Okay. And yeah, Vitor and Claudio, do you have anything to add to that? You know, you were
If I may,
expertise.
yes, I have something
Yeah,
to add.
please.
I totally agree that the main format will be the 210 times 182. We foresee that probably 2026 you will see the M10 start to disappear. We don't have that much request from the M10. So this is also related not just with the shape or the dimension of the module in the end, but mainly also with the electrical characteristics, because it doesn't pay off to have smaller cells with higher voltage, less modules per string. But I also agree that when we look to the M12, you still have a room. So there are still projects where you can optimize your BOS or your LCOE by using bigger modules with bigger cells, because of also the power that you can put on the string. So we perceive that the M12 will still be around, will be still a mainstream. M10 probably will disappear, and the main one will be the rectangular 210 182.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Just one
from
note
our side.
regarding the changes. Sorry, because I just forgot this. Because Alex mentioned that we can see some changes. Maybe when we start to speak about tandem and so on, and module level and cell level, we have a different discussion. Okay, but right now we are speaking about these dimensions. Sorry, Claudio.
Yeah. What we see is the rectangle cells are getting the most of market, as like my colleague saying, the 182 by 210 and 100 variations of the 182 by 192, something these, depending on the size of the model, would be these rectangle of cells that will be, in our view, for now, the main market.
Okay, I think let's also quickly touch cell technologies topic. As we all know, TOPCon is now become the industry's workhorse. But you know, what we keep hearing is that many producers are still struggling to make some profits. But what we learned during the conference is that a number of players continue to focus on TOPCon, and there is still some potential in the cost and efficiencies. But more and more companies are also launching BC products. So, you know, to everyone, how do you see the potential for TOPCon?
I mean, standard both sides contacted TOPCon still has plenty of headroom in terms of efficiency gains over the next few years. You know, so I think there's no doubt that that is going to be the dominant force in the market for the next couple of years, and that there is, yeah, room for efficiency improvements on that. And then we have this question about whether back contact might come to dominate a little bit further down the line that we can talk about a bit more. But certainly there's plenty of potential for TOPCon to improve a bit more. And you know, that is definitely going to be what's dominating the market in 2026 and realistically 2027 as well.
Okay. And you know, do you think BC would ever become the dominant technology in the market, or will you see market move to tandem before that?
So we think that BC could become the dominant technology in the market. So we do some bottom-up cost modeling, essentially trying to model the production cost for different technologies. You know, imagining that you are a sort of best-in-class integrated Chinese producer. And at the moment, our modeling suggests that back contact production cost for a sort of TOPCon back contact structure could become similar in cost per watt to the production cost for standard TOPCon in the sort of 2028 to 2030 timeframe. And when we've seen that in our models in the past, so we saw that with multi-BSF and mono-PERC, with mono-PERC sort of cost coming down to rival that of multi-BSF. And then we saw that in our modeling of TOPCon coming down to rival manufacturing cost of mono-PERC. When we've seen that in the past, we've seen these pretty broad sort of industry-wide transitions that have happened. So obviously there's a lot of uncertainty. It's a few years out. You know, it's not 100% clear how efficiencies will evolve, how, you know, metallization costs, capex, etc., will evolve. But we definitely think that sort of looking to that time frame of sort of 2028, 2029, there probably is a very big role for BC to play in the market. Whether it's, you know, how much it is BC taking over from TOPCon and how much it's a coexistence, I would say it's a bit hard to say at the moment, because we're not modeling back contact at the minute, you know, becoming much cheaper to make than TOPCon, for example, which is where you might see a really big shift. But certainly it's, we think it will gain significant market share in that kind of time frame. And there's a bit of an open question about, whether it will take over or how much they will coexist and be used for slightly different applications. But certainly I think that's what we see from manufacturers now, is them sort of lining up and laying the groundwork for that potential kind of transition, not necessarily in 2026. And certainly if you look at capacity plans, TOPCon cell capacity is set to continue to wildly outstrip back contact cell capacity in the next few years. But when we start to get out to looking at 2028, 2029, and you start to think about potentially upgrading lines and things like that as well, yeah, that's where we think there could be a pretty big shift potentially.
Okay. So I know, Claudio, I think you are very much upbeat about back contact technology, but Vitor, do you have any other opinion apart from what Alex just shared?
I totally agree with Alex. And in our case, to be very specific, I just mentioned that we are moving both directions, so TOPCon second version and back contact. And the reason is because we see application scenarios for both. So we look to back contact and we can consider it or call it a low albedo applications. Okay, so we have the bifacial factor that is different. We have to be concerned about that. But we also have advantages in some applications. And when we look to the distribution market, first they can absorb, because there is an important topic, is what price difference are we speaking about one technology in the other? And we are seeing some of the main promoters of back contact also dealing a little bit with the price difference. So in the distribution, you can absorb this price difference in a better way. The application is more suitable for back contact, and that's the main reason why we decided to also go. But we see that for utility, TOPCon 2.0 can and will be the mainstream. It doesn't mean that you don't have low albedo applications in utility and where you can use back contact, but we are looking to two main segments.
Okay, Claudio, I have a different question for you. AIKO has been the pioneer in the commercial BC technology. So how do you feel now that many companies are following your lead? So are you pleased, with the validation of your approach, or now you are more or less losing your exclusivity, right? So how are you feeling?
No, in general, we are even really happy on this push, because our vision, since we push for this technology, is that back contact will be the mainstream technology. And for that, of course, we need the price for the manufacturing to go a little bit down. And if it's only us to do it, the economy of scale for the other, for the wafers and everything, it's small. And we need this economy of scale to grow up so we can really be competitive on the pricing of the cells. And we think this will come soon, because we see now that many big manufacturers are understanding our vision on this point, and they are trying to do this change too. And when we start to get this economy of scales, we can be more competitive on the pricing side, and there we will beat. Because right now, if we talk about residential market and CNI market, we have no much discussion, because power density that we have in our models are really strong. But if we can little bit lower our production costs, we'll be really competitive for the utility market too. And we can really lower the cost for the POS and the LCOE with what the end customer needs on this project.
And one more follow-up question on the BC. Now, actually, during our prep calls, a lot of companies try to compare TOPCon with BC. So we really requested not to do so. That for another reason. But, I think some comparison has started between BC and TOPCon. So does this mean the BC is really ready, is becoming into the mainstream? And is it really ready for utility scale applications?
In my point of view, it's ready for this point of the utility scale applications. We are seeing that the optimization of the cells and the evolution of the cells is getting there. And many of the optimizations you are seeing TOPCon cells getting, you can apply these same technologies to the back contact cells in many ways. So we see many of the optimizations that you are getting for TOPCon, they can in some way be applied to the back contact cells. So you can still see this evolution on the efficiency on the back contact cells applying. So on this point, you will see this helping in getting even higher power density, so even helping to the back contact to be more competitive on the market.
Okay, Alex, on other hand, so I don't know if you have seen the presentation from Christian from Huasan. So they got a very interesting installation, vertical installations where, the price, the time of the day is becoming more, and they have higher bifaciality. So I think they have a chance there. So unfortunately, we don't have heterojunction representation here in the panel. So what's your take on heterojunction very quickly?
So, I mean, we think there are certain applications where it will make sense. And essentially, but we think it will remain a relatively niche product. So like I was saying, we think TOPCon dominates the next few years. Probably in that 2028, 2029 timeframe, we see a big growth in back contact. And through all those years, I think we will see some heterojunction in the background where it's sort of specific advantages in terms of very high bifaciality or low temperature coefficient might make a little bit of sense. But we don't see it being, the mainstream product that really drives the industry. We think it will be reserved for, certain specific applications.
Okay. I actually prepared a lot of questions, but unfortunately there is no time. So I quickly want to cover two more segments, so modules and BOS. So for me, I think a real interesting thing was looking at the presentations in the conference or when attending this show. I think the modules are becoming more and more application specific. So module makers are also making a specific product adapted BOS for one particular, the desert application, the marine application, or, I think specific applications. So this is what my key takeaway. But what do you, at the module level, what you have seen? Alex?
Yeah, I mean, so we've definitely seen more of that in terms of like alternative frame materials and things like that as well. So steel frames for certain applications, composite frames now as well being pushed more for certain applications. And I think realistically we will probably see some more of that as well.
Okay. Claudio, do you have anything to say on that? Regarding the module developments?
You see an adaptation, especially, for example, for the utility market. We have two versions of our model, one specially dedicated for the floating projects, especially we see a big market on the floating near the seaside. So these models need to be treated more carefully in some way, because you have the corrosion caused by the salt and humidity. So we are being, let's say, of course, we'll have niche products, but how big this will be, it will depend, of course, on the market needs. Because we can do many things, but if its market is small, we will not be cost competitive. So this is quite important point on the market. Okay, you can do many products. Of course, they can be differentiated, but if they will not be cost competitive, unfortunately, they will not driven on the market.
Right, Peter. Anything else?
Yeah, from my side, as you realize, we have a philosophy that is not one solution fits all. So even from the cell technology, we are advancing in two ways because we see different applications. But of course, the designs and solutions also, we have specific. We mentioned floating. For example, we have with the Ocean Sun the design for high waves solution with a membrane, the composite frame. So these are niche markets solutions. I think that we need to be prepared for that. Agrivoltaic demands not tailor-made, but almost. So we will have variants with the different costs, of course, because it's not volume and mass production. But I totally agree with the comments from Alex and Claudio. I think that all the manufacturers should also be ready for these small niche markets and have the designs with the composite frames, with the floating, with the offshore, and so on.
And so what's your key takeaways from the BOS development? So what you have seen really innovative in BOS, balance of system? Anyone?
I didn't look at so much of that this year, so I'll defer to the other guys on that if they did.
Okay. Please.
If it's talking for the point of the models, of course, we are seeing that, for example, the 66 cells brings an improvement on the BOS side. We can make a longer string with a current still not so high as in the big G12 sees. So we can be a long string, but still with the cable under control. So we can bring a quite good optimization for BOS, especially for the big projects. So a good point where we see these.
Okay.
Maybe I have one thing. I think we are aligned. I think that one of the main trends is the so-called harmonization. And I agree with Alex, we are not totally harmonized, but we are better. I remember that since 2020, when we started the dimensions of cells discussion, I was on stage many times with the trackers manufacturers and afraid they would not be so happy with me. Right now, I think they are more relaxed, and I also saw a lot of innovations on the trackers and structures side. So we also see new materials, new solutions, new installations methods, new fixation methods. This is very interesting, but I think the biggest takeaway is this module that is so-called harmonized, that we are looking more at it, and it makes also the life of everyone a little bit easier.
Perfect. So I think then I would like to do the wrap-up reflection. So which current trends do you personally think is kind of hyped, and really very briefly, and why? And then, which innovations, you believe that have the biggest impact? Very briefly, I think we are reaching our time. Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, it feels mean to say that something is too hyped, but let's say I'm a little bit cautious on single junction perovskites. I think tandems have a lot of potential in the future. I think single junction, remains a fairly niche thing, BOPV and things like that, and it's sort of there's a reason for it to exist, but I don't think it's a big industry-changing thing. That kind of single junction perovskites. And then the thing that have a sort of the thing that worries me that might have a long-term impact is all the cost cutting. Everything being stripped back as much as possible. And I worry that the long-term impact will be that we will see higher field failure rates for several years to come from some of the modules that are being made at the moment. And I guess in a more optimistic sense, the thing that I guess I'm looking forward to in terms of long-term impact is what we were talking about manufacturers sort of getting everything lined up for possible shift towards back contact and the sort of extra efficiency that might offer as well.
Okay. Victor?
Okay, from my side, I think that if I'm allowed, the thing that impressed me more was my visit to our tandem perovskite factory that was inaugurated 2 days ago in our first day of session of 2 gigawatts. So, and I also see that the single perovskite is a different topic, but being present in a line of 2 gigawatts of tandem perovskite right now, it's quite impressive, and this was a huge impact. So we are already investing a lot on the future, and I think that this tandem will be also a game changer.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course, I should say the back contact, it's one trend, and it's really a proof that when we see that so many suppliers are getting these trends. We see, of course, in the future, the tandem cells will be the future, but the base of the tandem cells will be a back contact cell. This, at least in my opinion, I'm quite sure that this will happen, that the base will have the tandem cells, yes, and the base will be a back contact cell at this point. Okay. If it will perovskite or not will be applied, I'm not sure. Okay. Because I've been here about these technologies for a long time, but not big developments in general. But so we are here to see what will come.
Great. So thanks a lot. I think the key takeaways, innovations are really continuing in PV, right? So that's what that's what my key takeaway from all these conferences and discussions. So PV is continuing to innovate and evolve. So I'm really proud to be part of such a nice, positive outlooking industry. So thanks a lot to everyone, Alex, Vitor, and Claudio, and also each and everyone who really contributed in terms of their presentation and also the participants. So I would like to, close this conference with a few closing slides. So to everyone, so please also, mark your calendar. Our next conference would be PV system technology trends. So here, sorry, I think this is already done. So our next conference would be on July 17th. This is Global Solar Market Development, H1 Review and H2 Outlook. So the basic idea behind this conference is we have finished half of this year, and as I asked, how is going to market look like in the panel, like how are we seeing the overcapacity and all this. I think a lot of you might have the same questions. I think this will be dealt very specifically in our upcoming conference, which is on July 17th. And yeah, next slide, please. And yes, so at SNEC, we have also launched our top solar modules H1 2025 analysis report on day one. That was day before yesterday. I gave a summary, but the report is really available for download. And we have few more reports in pipeline. We are going to launch a report on solar cell production equipment, and then also a product review of SNEC and Intersolar, really covering a very large collection of products that are divided into PV and inverter and storage. Yeah, I think this is what we have for today. Thanks a lot to our sponsors, especially Longi, our platinum sponsor or gold sponsor, AIKO, Huasan, Jinko and Trina, silver sponsor, DMAC, GCL and Tongwei, bronze sponsor, Dasola. Thanks a lot again. And then, yeah, we will again see us soon, already on 17th July. Till then, keep reading TaiyangNews. Bye-bye.